the southern outskirts of Addis Ababa, where the bustling city met the brittle edge of a neglected woodland reserve, a forgotten trail wound into the shadows. It led past old eucalyptus trees, dry riverbeds, and a cracked iron gate that once marked the entrance to the Alem Wildlife Containment Zone, an enclosure abandoned nearly a decade prior due to funding cuts and political disinterest. Over the years, vines crept over its broken fences, and the once lively paths were consumed by dust and silence. Few remembered the place, and fewer dared enter. Inside the ruins of the reserve, amid shattered enclosures and the rusted bones of infrastructure, a creature moved like a shadow. Its appearance was haunting. The shape was unmistakably feline, yet grotesquely deformed. With fur lost to mange and skin blackened and scabbed, its limbs looked like they belonged to a massive bat crawling across the ground. Its eyes, deep and sorrowful, flickered with the dimmest trace of life. Its ribs pushed sharply through its skin, and its back bowed under the weight of unseen suffering. It moved slowly, painfully, pausing often to catch its breath. What remained of the lion bore little resemblance to the kingly beast etched into flags and folk tales. This one was a whisper of majesty, a ghost dragging its own history through the dirt. It had survived by drinking from plastic rain catchers left behind, gnawing on decayed bones, and hiding from the world that had long forgotten him. For years, the lion had waited without knowing for what. Across the continent, in a wildlife monitoring lab in Cape Town, a team of researchers analyzing aerial drone footage from outdated conservation zones stumbled upon footage that gave them pause. A curious shadow had been captured moving across the ground in a way that defied easy explanation. The footage was sent to a senior conservation specialist in Nairobi, who then forwarded it to a rescue network stretching into Ethiopia. Weeks passed until finally, someone with enough authority raised a hand and called ... A small 3-person team was sent from the Menelik Wildlife Trust, one of the few remaining conservation organizations still active in that region. The team trekked into the overgrown enclosure with no expectations. They carried sedatives, makeshift stretchers, and more hope than reason. When they first saw the lion curled beside a torn piece of tarpaulin covered in collected rainwater, they stopped walking. Time seemed to suspend itself. The sight was not one of power, but of pain, a creature that show. It took hours to secure and sedate the lion without causing further distress or cardiac trauma. Every movement was measured, every breath monitored with trembling hands. They named him Besharat, which meant sign or omen in Amharic, because to them, his survival was just that, a sign that even in desolation, something could remain, endure, and perhaps still be saved. Besharat was transported to a temporary field station, built years ago but never fully activated until now. He arrived barely conscious, his body temperature erratic, his breathing shallow. His tail was nearly hairless. His claws were worn to the quick. Parasites had carved small valleys across his skin, and infections had eaten through muscle and flesh. The veterinary team worked through the night. Fleas and mites were burned away. Antibiotics, fluids, and nutrients were administered. His first response. The coming weeks tested everyone's endurance. Some days, Besharat lay entirely still, and the caregivers feared they had arrived too late. Other days he surprised them, turning his head when they entered, licking the water placed near his mouth, or simply surviving the night. The slow return of consciousness brought with it tremors, confusion, and pain, but also the faint return of instinct. He began to recognize feeding schedules. His body, once a map of pain, began slowly stitching itself back together. Caregivers moved quietly around him. No one raised their voice or made sudden movements. Besharat was treated like sacred ground, approached with reverence. His enclosure was expanded as he regained strength. When he finally stood unaided for the first time, his legs wobbled like saplings in the wind, but he stood. And in that moment, something shifted in the hearts of those who had come to know him. He was not a ghost. He was a king in exile, returning. The story of Besharat spread beyond the confines of the center. Journalists, conservationists, and even artists began to share his image. One of the first photos taken, a haunting portrait of his gaunt face lit by the setting sun, was displayed in galleries and museums across the world. What shocked viewers more than his appearance was his resilience. Children sent drawings. Schools held fundraisers. Ethiopian diaspora communities abroad pooled resources to support the rescue center. Besharat's recovery was slow but undeniable. His fur returned in patches, first as fuzz, then as golden streaks across his spine and shoulders. His appetite returned gradually, and with it, his weight. The days of shivering under plastic sheets were gone. He now lay on fresh straw under shaded canopies, with clean water and daily meals prepared with surgical precision. By the end of the 3rd month, he had developed a routine. He paced the edge of his enclosure at dawn. He roared, though hoarsely, when planes passed overhead. He had become more than a lion in recovery. He had become a symbol, a living answer to the question of whether neglected creatures still mattered in a world moving too fast to look back. An environmental nonprofit funded the expansion of the temporary station into a permanent sanctuary. Named Besharat Grove, it became a refuge for injured and aging predators who had nowhere else to go. The gates bore his name in bold steel letters, and each visitor was greeted with a large mural of Besharat's silhouette, thin, bent, but unbowed. Besharat's final years were peaceful. He shared his enclosure with no other lions, but birds often landed near him, unafraid. He would rest under trees, soaking in the morning light, breathing in the wind like a monarch surveying his quiet kingdom. Volunteers who came to work at the sanctuary often felt something shift in them after seeing him. They spoke of awe, of sorrow, of purpose. One morning, under a rising sun tinted with the dust of a coming rain, Besharat did not rise. A caretaker approached quietly and found him lying peacefully in the reeds, his body still, his expression calm. He had passed without struggle, in the place that had become his final home. There was no ceremony, only silence. The kind that reverberates through the bones and settles into the soul. His burial was held at the edge of the sanctuary, beneath an old sycamore tree. A stone carved with his name marked the spot, along with the date he was found. Nearby, a second stone was erected, not as a grave marker, but as a promise. It bore an inscription in 3 languages: Amharic, English, and Oromo. No life is too lost to be remembered. No creature too broken to be loved. After his passing, the sanctuary received more support than ever. Besharat's story became a case study in veterinary schools. His life was memorialized in murals, in children's books, and in a film screened at international festivals. He had once looked like death itself, a diseased shadow, mistaken for something monstrous, but his spirit had become something luminous. His suffering had not been for nothing. It had lit fires in the hearts of those who refused to let him fade. And so he lived on, not in the ache of his early days, but in the promise that followed. His legacy was not merely in survival, but in transformation. The bat-like lion of Elam was gone, but in his place had risen a movement, a sanctuary, a song, 1,000 ripples of renewed compassion across the globe. Years later, a child visiting Besharat Grove asked their teacher why there was a statue of a lion who looked sick and tired, not strong and roaring. The teacher paused, then smiled, placing a hand on the child's shoulder. Because strength, they explained, is not always in the body. Sometimes it's in the waiting, in the surviving, in the ones who still rise even when no one is watching. And in the shade of the sycamore tree, the wind whispered through the leaves, carrying the memory of the lion who had once looked like a monster, but who had been, all along, a king waiting to be seen.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.